If we had understood at the time that we passed the last budget that $8.8 billion in additional revenues would actually be available to us for the 12-13 biennium, do you think we would have made a different decision about the $5.4 billion in cuts to public ed?
Senator Davis, the comptroller makes the revenue estimate, and we can only work within that estimate. And I don't mean to be trite about it, but I would tell you my grandfather often told me if ifs and buts were candy and nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas. And so I don't think we can go back in retrospect and take a look at what we would have done. We did the only decision that we could make at the time is what we made. And I think we contemplated the very action that we're going to take on the floor today.
I think if we did know at the time that we had $8.8 billion, I don't think that this chamber would have voted for a total of $5.4 billion in cuts to public education, and I certainly don't think it would have done that if it understood at the time that the rainy day fund was going to grow by the end of this biennium to potentially being the $14.8 billion figure that $11.8 billion figure that the comptroller is estimating. Right now we have an option available to us, which is rather than taking the Medicaid money from the supplemental, to take it from the rainy day fund. And we could fully restore the cuts to public education were we to do that. Do you disagree that that's something worth considering?
I don't. Senator Davis, I think that decision has been made and the die was cast during the last session and also when we introduced this bill. And so I don't think it's appropriate to do that. And I know that there are other demands that we may have on the rainy day fund that are important demands, as public education is, that are important core functions of our state government. One of those would be to create a fund to backstop highway funding projects. Another would be a fund for water projects. Also very critical, both things. I think the difference is that those would be one-time expenditures out of the rainy day fund, and what you're talking about is taking money out of the rainy day fund for the operations and routine operations of state government. I think that if we did what you're contemplating, it would seriously impact the state's credit rating because I think they're watching. They want to be sure that Texas is not spending the rainy day fund money for things that are operating expenses. And so I think that would be a bad choice if we made that. Is it a choice that we could make? Yes, that we could. But I think the decision on that has been made, and I think that what we're doing in these 2 or 3 bills that are going to be the 3 bills that Senator Duncan and I have on the floor today, it's already contemplated and assumed in the base budget that these are the actions that we would take.
Let me present something that would be absolutely no question about it, a one-time expenditure that could be taken from the rainy day fund, and it's the other 2 bills that we're going to consider today. The reversal of the delay in payments to school districts by $1.7 billion and the reversal in the speed up that Senator Duncan is going to introduce today in about an $870 million number, I think. Those 2 are one-time payments, could be made from the rainy day fund. If they were made from the rainy day fund, that would be $2.5 billion in this supplemental that could instead go to restore about half of the cuts that were made to public school funding. Was that ever discussed?
Senator Davis, we've had extensive discussions about this in the Senate Finance Committee, and I think that you'll see that we put an additional $1.4 billion in the formulas in the base bill. That's already been adopted by the Finance Committee, and it was adopted, as I recall, it was either 14-0 or 15-0. So there was, bipartisan support for the approach that we're taking to solve this problem that none of us like, but it is a reality that we have to deal with.
Well, I think it's wonderful that that decision was made for 14-15, but obviously it's a far cry from getting us back to where we need to be, and our school districts are hurting right now. You probably know that the estimate of the number of educators who lost their jobs because of that cut is in excess of 20,000 in the education arena. The classroom size waivers between 10-11 and 11-12 increased from about 2,200 requests to about 8,400 requests. People today in Texas are hurting in the educational arena because of the cuts that we made. And we could be making decisions differently about how we are laying out what we are doing here today in the Senate, and could accommodate, if our priorities were in the right place, in my opinion, we could accommodate at least restoring up to half of what those cuts were simply by taking these two one-time payments out of the rainy day fund instead of taking them out of the supplemental.
Well, Senator Davis, I think that we could have taken that approach had we not had the school districts file a lawsuit against the state of Texas. And I would say that they have tied the hands of the legislature by filing that lawsuit. And I think that every time they don't get exactly what they want, they run to the courthouse, and it's become a cottage industry among a group of attorneys and consultants here in Austin to bring these lawsuits. And it's not helpful to this process at all, and it keeps us from arriving at the best answer. And so the time to address what you're talking about is in what will almost certainly be a special session in 2014 after the Supreme Court decides on the school finance case that is on appeal right now.
Well, you and I will have to agree to disagree on that, Senator Williams. I believe that we left our school districts with no choice other than to challenge the underfunding of public schools in Texas through the core system.